What's going on, everybody? This is Clydean Fair. Let's talk about Wartales Advanced Warrior Builds Edition. So obviously we're redoing our build guide series here, and we're about at the halfway point with this video. So I'm going to be, skipping through most of the fluff and stuff and getting on into the builds here. So a quick overview of warriors in general. I am not a huge fan of Sentinel, so I'm not going to be featuring any Sentinel builds in this video. That being said though, Sentinel does work really well for large groups. Their ability is very good for a large unit base. I prefer to use less units, therefore Sentinel is just one of those things that does not synergize well with my personal playstyle, hence why I'm not covering it, because there's going to be other people out there who have better input on this. Anyway, without further ado, the first build that we're going to be covering is called the Engager. Now, this build essentially focuses around engaging enemy units and dealing single target DPS as you, engage units and deal damage. So we're going to be grabbing Berserker, which is personally my favorite subclass when it comes down to warriors. So with Berserker, you get Rampage, and then we're going to be grabbing Valorous Duel. After Valorous Duel, we will be grabbing Madness. Now, Madness could be swapped out for something else at this level. For example, you could give it First Blood if you have the specialization unlocked from the Grinmere Arena. After we grab Madness, we're going to grab Battlecry. And then after Battlecry, we're going to be using Lone Wolf, followed by class specialization, and then grabbing either First Blood or Madness, depending on which one you did not pick earlier. Now, Madness is kind of hit or miss here, and I enjoy it because it gives me a little bit of extra pressure once units get lower, and it helps me kill them quicker so I can move on to engaging another unit. Engager is kind of meant to be a medium unit, like kind of a bruiser, not really a tank, but also a semi-DPS unit as well. Engager is going to be this hybrid type build. A really good profession for them would be using Woodcutter for this unit, which works really well, but Miner would also be really good as a return option. Getting into our weapons, we're going to be using Trader's Axe. Now, Trader's Axe gives you the natural strike ability, which is very useful, is guaranteed to apply oils on your basic attack. So knowing that we're guaranteed to apply oils, we're going to be using Unstable Oil. So Unstable Oil will give us an attack of opportunity, and then our second oil we're going to add is going to be Acidic. Now, burning doesn't really mesh too well here, but I'm going to be utilizing this anyway because I really want to have a little bit of extra staying power since I'm planning on being engaged all the time with this unit. That leads us into going over our armor. The best in slot for this build is going to be Reinforced Layer of the Serpent. Until the path system gets reworked, Reinforced Layer of the Rat will most likely be best in slot for this build until we get Reinforced Layer of the Serpent added back into the game. Finally, we're going to be using Faithless as an offhand. Faithless will increase your critical damage by 10% as well as your critical hit by 10%. And on top of that, it lets you deal a little bit of extra damage to the furthest enemy away from you in a 6-meter area every time you use a skill. So it's pretty solid. And then on top of that, we're going to be using Fireproof Ointment, which doesn't make us actually fireproof. It just means that we don't take damage from the fire. So we can essentially be a one-man fire spreading machine. Every time someone comes up next to us and we end our turn, we're going to be spreading the fire debuff all around us, and it's going to be great. So we're essentially a permanent man on fire, and that's kind of the core sense of this build. As a quick side note, Trader's Axe you'll be able to get from the Ludern community bounties, and Faithless you will get after completing the Drombach Arena. Now, moving on to our next build, we're going to be covering the DOT. Now, the DOT is exactly what you think it is, and it's going to focus around damage over time effects. So first things first, we're going to be grabbing Executioner. It'll give us a little bit more area of effect damage to help us spread more dots around and deal as much damage as possible when it's not necessarily our turn. At level 3, we're going to be grabbing Valorous Chain, followed by First Blood. First Blood is an ability that will unlock once you unlock the Barbarian specialization in the Grinmere province. After we grab First Blood, we're going to be using Battlecry. Now, Battlecry is a really useful buff. It applies brutality to all allies and this unit in a fairly large vicinity for 3 rounds. Finally, we're going to be ending the build off with Lone Wolf as well as Daredevil, which gives us Frenzy for 3 rounds. And essentially what Frenzy does is it increases our damage output based off how much health we're missing, which isn't really that big of a deal, but it gives us guaranteed crits for 3 turns, which is insane. Now, since we're going to be utilizing Frenzy, it wouldn't be that big of a deal if we went ahead and used Blacksmith as a profession here. I'm personally using Angler to give us a little bit more critical hit chance in the off chance that I'm not going to be able to open up with Frenzy on the first turn. We are going to be using Splitter as a weapon. Splitter is gained once you beat Alexa in Vertruce. It is her regional champion item. On Splitter, we're going to be using Infectious Oil as well as Unstable Oil. Infectious Oil is essentially going to give you a double Splitter passive. Splitter already basically has a built-in Infectious Oil passive, but now it's going to deal even more damage. On top of that, we're using Unstable Oil, so we'll be able to attack a little bit more often as long as we are within range of people when we use our AoE attacks. Because we're going to be utilizing so many AoE attacks, the Unstable Oil will most likely proc at least once, if not multiple times, for each AoE attack. We're going to be using Acadian Steel Brigandine again. Reinforced Layer of the Serpent's going to be best in slot. I'm going to be using Reinforced Layer of the Rat. And for our belt item, we're going to be using the Unstable Oil Concentrate, so we're going to really be able to maximize our attack of opportunities. To get as many attack of opportunities as we can is because it's going to apply Infectious Oil as well, and nothing makes you feel better than knowing that the enemy is going to die by the end of their next turn because of all the stacks of Infectious Oil and bloodshed on the enemy. Moving on from the DOT, we're going to be getting into First Blood. Now, First Blood is going to be exactly what you think it is. It's going to utilize Reckless, and it's going to deal a lot of damage. We're going to be starting off with Executioner because Maelstrom is arguably the strongest ability in the game if you're really capable of like hitting multiple units. We're going to be also grabbing Valorous Chain and then Recklessness, and that's where things start to pop off a little bit, but it really doesn't start scaling out until level 8 when you get Challenging Shout. Challenging Shout's going to pull in enemies whenever you have it fully upgraded. It's going to apply Fragility to all of them as well, which essentially increases the damage that they receive from your attacks by 30%. After that, we're going to be using Lone Wolf, so we're going to be increasing our damage output as well, and then we'll be grabbing the class specialization and then First Blood, which will increase our damage output by another 35% against enemies with full health, and will also apply Fragility for 2 rounds once it's upgraded. For our overall choice in professions, honestly, anything strength-based would work really well. I'm currently using Miner on this one, but Woodcutter would be the best. Woodcutter's just really hard to level up. Angler would also be really good. For our equipment, we're going to be running Mutiny. Mutiny is a very strong community item that you can get in Tiltrin. And on Mutiny, we are going to be running Unstable Oil and Misty Oil. Unstable Oil is going to mesh really well with the fact that we're going to be dealing a lot of AoE damage, so it should give us the opportunity to proc multiple attacks of opportunity every time we attack. On top of that, we're going to be using Misty Oil so we can start splashing damage. Combining Challenging Shout with Misty Oil, considering all these units are going to be next to each other, you're going to see a lot of damage bouncing back and forth from every area of effect attack. Going into our Acadian Steel Brigandine, we're going to be using Reinforced Layers of the Serpent, but of course these are not in the game currently, so Reinforced Layers of the Rat will be the best choice. And finally, for our belt item, we're going to be using the Unstable Oil Concentrate because that's going to give us the most bang for our buck and give us the most attack of opportunity chances to be used in this particular setup. Moving on from First Blood, we are going to be getting into our Berserker. Now, obviously, Berserker is going to be a Berserker build, but let's go ahead and dig on into it. Starting off, we're going to be grabbing Berserker, which is going to give us access to Rampage, following with Valorous Duel as well as First Blood. After First Blood, we're going to be grabbing Limit Break and then Lone Wolf. And finally, after Lone Wolf, we're grabbing Daredevil, which is going to be our cornerstone. Obviously, with this, you really need to have the Barbarian subclass already acquired. This is going to be found in the Grinmere arenas. After you complete those, you can go and unlock the Barbarian subclass. So going into professions for Berserker, anything that is going to increase your critical hit chance and or critical damage, so increasing your strength or increasing critical hit is going to be the best option because this is going to be a very crit focused build. For our weapon, we're going to be using Devotion, which you get from defeating the champion and Ludern. Devotion essentially gives you 2 stacks of rage every time you attack, but if you have a critical hit, you gain an additional 2 stacks of rage. Rage increases your damage output by 5%. So on every crit, you're increasing your damage output by essentially 20% on your main basic attack. On top of this, we're going to be using Infectious Oil as well as Misty Oil. And then in our Acadian Steel Brigandine, obviously, Reinforced Layers of the Serpent. These can be replaced with Reinforced Layers of the Rat to give you a little bit more critical hit chance. That way, in case you run out of your Frenzy, you will still have the ability to critical hit more often. For our offhand on Berserker, we're going to be utilizing Faithless, which you can get once you complete the Drombach Arena. And then for our belt item, we're going to be using the Misty Oil Concentrate. This is going to give us the most splash damage that we possibly can get. And remember, Misty Oil splash damage is going to go through guard. It's going to go through armor. So what essentially you're going to want to do is find a tank with a squishy unit next to it, and then you just unload on the squishy unit next to it, and then all the splash damage will transfer directly to the tank. And this is how you can take out tanks while ignoring guard. On a side note, the acidic oil that is used on Engager can be found in Arthas in one of the Castle Alchemists. The unstable oil that is frequently used on most of these builds can be found in Ludern. Infectious oil is going to be found at the Grinmere Alchemist. And last but not least, the Misty Oil is going to be found in the Garusa Clan Alchemist in Ludern. Anyway, guys, that is all I've got for this video. Special shout out to Dorim once again for having all of the locations for these items that are required in these builds listed so neatly in his guide, which is going to be linked below in the video description. Let me know what your favorite personal warrior build is in the comments below. And if you like this content and would like to see more videos such as this, like the video, make that number go up, and I hope to catch you all in my live stream chat or in my comment section. Until next time, have a good one.